If you were somebody who took it seriously that the president of the United States is gonna tack you out by name and call you a lowlife, you might not say, you know what, here's a few $1,000,000, bud. Have fun with it.
If you have a backbone, John, how embarrassing. Like, someone has mocked you so publicly. Someone has attacked your company so dishonestly, and the thing you do is you send them money?
Welcome to Power Lines, presented this week by Beehive. I'm John Passantino.
And I'm Oliver Darcy.
Today, MSNBC hosts are bashing their parent company for helping bankroll Trump's East Wing destruction. David Ellison's Paramount is reeling after it laid off 1,000 staffers across the company, hitting the news division hard. CNN chief Mark Thompson is offering his thoughts on Bari Weiss's first month there at CBS, effectively deflecting on her right-wing tilt there. But first, Tucker Carlson has hosted Nick Fuentes on his show, making nice after what had been quite a feud. Oliver, happy Halloween. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. What are you going as, John? You have kids to take
I was going to
trick-or-treating.
ask you that. I'm going as, have you ever seen the movie American Psycho before? It's a cult classic.
Are you really going? Is that character?
I'm going as Patrick Bateman. That's right.
Are you really?
Suit. I've got a suit and a raincoat that I wear. I got a little axe and my headphones in I guess early 90s style.
Isn't that kind of scary for the kids?
Yeah. Well, you know, the nice thing is that the kids have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just a guy in a suit with a raincoat on top. Daddy, why are you wearing that? It's pretty great. But for the adults who get it, like they get it.
You take an actual axe with you?
It's a toy. It's a play axe. Yeah, it's plastic, but I wore it at a Halloween party the other night, and half the people in the room thought I was a completely different character and had no clue. But like a few people got it and immediately were like, "Holy shit! Like this is great. I love Patrick Bateman." What about yourself?
No Halloween costume. We will stay home, and we signed up in our building to accept trick-or-treaters. And so we will stay home and wait for the probably, 3 or 4 kids to come by. And Elise will, I'm sure, hand them large, gobs of candy because
full-size candy bars. You got to go all in.
Many people are coming. Yeah.
We've already been getting these full-size giant Skittles packs, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, my kids are 3. Like, this is way too much candy. They go to my special drawer. All right. Anyways, happy Halloween. Wow, what a week it's been. It's been another week of what feels like tricks and treats in the media as well. Tucker Carlson, for some reason, decided to host Nick Fuentes. This is the Christian nationalist, white supremacist, far-right podcaster who has denied the Holocaust, pushed anti-Semitic views, like you name it. This is pretty much as extreme as it's going to get in the podcasting world. Tucker Carlson decides to host him on his show this week after what had been a bit of a MAGA civil war, a lot of bad-mouthing one another, a lot of talk about the other being, ridiculous and terrible and all that. And now suddenly they're making nice. Tucker apologizes to him on his show, really offers like this fig leaf that has sort of come out of nowhere. Did you see this episode, Oliver? What do you think?
I watched a decent chunk of it, and I think this is like really fitting for Tucker Carlson because he has for a long time been the guy who brings on these really radical fringe figures and kind of pulls them into the mainstream. And I remember when he was at Fox, he was the first person to interview Marjorie Taylor Greene when she was sort of outcast from the conservative media sphere. She was considered as someone just even too extreme for, this is remarkable to think about now in 2025, but she was considered too extreme for Fox News, and she was not being invited on these shows. And Tucker Carlson was the one that broke that ice, I guess, and brought her on the show. And over the years, I think he's done he's continued to pull these people from the fringes and get them into the mainstream, acting like a bridge. And it's almost like he relishes, I think, to some extent in the backlash he gets from platforming these people. And as he I think to get that high, he almost has to go more extreme every single time. And so I guess this was this was the final place to go, which was platforming a white nationalist and giving him this really chummy interview.
But why would he? I mean, I get that he wants to go even more, I guess, extreme, grow his audience even more, right? Like Nick Fuentes has been the subject recently of like New York Times profiles about how he has this really big audience of young men in the MAGAverse. And there's probably some good overlap in audience between both Nick and Tucker. But I think, for me, what's that?
You think that there's a good audience overlap?
Yeah, well, I think there's a large overlap between the two, right? Who are listening to both and probably get a kick out of the fact that like they had been attacking one another, criticizing one another as gay, and all the like epithets that are like cool among like 20-year-old MAGA types. But I don't know what Tucker gets out of this. Is it just purely the short-term gain of more audience, more views, keeping people interested in his show, but not caring really about the ramification of it? Or maybe this is more of an even more deeper, sinister embrace of more even extreme values on the far right that Tucker is sort of wading into.
Well, I think they do obviously share quite a bit in common. I mean, Tucker himself is effectively a white nationalist now, and has trafficked in a lot of anti-immigrant views for some time. And that's what Nick Fuentes, that's what he does. So there is a lot of overlap in, I think, what they believe. So it was always kind of a little strange to see them feuding because like they sort of are on the same end of the like MAGA sphere, and they're on the, I want to say the fringes, but they have very radical views on these things. So I think that's one, but I also think he knows that people are going to talk about it. And Tucker really likes the attention. He likes poking the eyes of other people and getting people to be outraged at him. And this is another way to do that. And I even hesitate to talk about Tucker because I think he feeds off of the attention. The problem is that he is wielding a lot of influence over the MAGA movement, and particularly, I think, over young men. And, during this interview, and I think we have the clip we can play, but well, actually, let's listen to it. It's Nick Fuentes talking about how he was radicalized on race by Mark Levin.
You listen to Mark Levin every day?
In high school, yes.
Wow.
I was a fan. I loved his show. And I actually liked how he was kind of obnoxious and mean to his callers.
Yeah.
Vicious. And I liked that. I thought that was funny. But I'll never forget one show. He goes live and he says, America's becoming a majority non-white country. Does anybody think that's a good idea? And I was thinking to myself, yeah, that actually doesn't sound so good. I didn't really even think that America's becoming majority minority like that.
Wait, so you were radicalized on race by Mark Levin?
Yes.
Are you making that up? Or that's
a real story.
I think what's worrisome here is that a lot of young men like Nick Fuentes 10 years ago were listening to Tucker Carlson, are listening to Tucker Carlson today, and they're hearing Nick Fuentes and Tucker traffic in these anti-immigrant views, and they're being exposed to them. And if someone like Nick Fuentes can become, so radicalized by listening to Mark Levin, who is considered to be a pretty mainstream conservative media personality, imagine what the new generation is going to look like when they've grown up listening to Tucker Carlson and are now being exposed to the likes of Nick Fuentes.
Right. It feels like the fringe has gone even more to the fringe over time. It kind of reminds me of this scandal that broke out that Politico reported these text messages among young Republicans in particular, in which they were not so subtly either outright praising Hitler or expressing really, hateful views on immigrants, Black people. Pretty much anybody who was not like a white Christian. And where does that even come from, right? Like, where did they become so radical or so extreme on these views? And like, it's a reflection of where they're getting their information. They're hanging out in these spaces. And by Tucker, who is very mainstream, right? Like he's a name that like our parents know, that 70-year-olds who go and pull the lever to actually vote know who Tucker Carlson is. And they are like, he's like good guy, bad guy, whatever you view, but they know him. And so if you tune into this show, which is on YouTube and big platforms, you're going to get now with Nick Fuentes this softball, chummy chat interview in which this guy who has, actively promoted the idea that Jews who died in the Holocaust were like cookies in an oven. But a very soft interview where you're like, oh, that doesn't seem like a bad guy. Like, he seems pretty nice. Wow, maybe I'll subscribe to his show too. And it's the express lane down the rabbit hole, further into this extremist world where you do find people now who are young and listening to this stuff, espousing it as if it's, just everyday commonality views, right? You would never be able to turn on your television set or your radio and hear this sort of thing. And now here we have it, and it's right before our eyes, and Tucker seems to be okay with dancing even further into the fringes of anti-Semitic and Holocaust denial.
Yeah, and I think that's why, it was really interesting, because to some extent there is still some resistance to this on the right. And so you saw this week Dinesh D'Souza, who, that man is all MAGA, right? He was the guy behind the 2000 Mules conspiracy theory film promoting election denialism. His MAGA credentials are as good as anyone. But he even came out and he posted online these messages he got from Charlie Kirk from, I guess, a few years ago, when Dinesh D'Souza decided to debate Nick Fuentes. And the messages from Charlie Kirk were he was outraged. He was like, this guy is vermin, is what Charlie Kirk called Nick Fuentes. He says, we've been fighting this guy for so long, and even by debating him, you are bringing him up. You are lifting him up. This is the best thing that could have happened to him. And so one must wonder, what would Charlie Kirk think about Tucker Carlson debate or hosting this chummy chat with Nick Fuentes? Even Charlie Kirk, who had extreme views, was not touching Nick Fuentes.
No, it's actually remarkable to see because, as you note, Dinesh D'Souza isn't exactly your Bush neocon conservative. So the fact that even he's pushed back. But if you look at the comments and people who are reacting to Dinesh too, there's a lot of people who agree with him and think that this was, sort of touching the third rail here, that Tucker embracing, which is, it's really hard to see it any other way, a figure that's so far. But to me, I get the view from this that Tucker views Nick Fuentes as somebody now who's grown in effectively in power in the space, and he has to contend with it. And I think that if you look at the constant trajectory of where this is all going in the far right media space, it continues to get more extreme over time. It is not moderating itself. It is not pulling back. And there are a few voices like Ben Shapiro who are not going that direction.
Well, they are even being dragged right to the right. Like Ben Shapiro was never Trump. And this last election cycle, he hosted a Trump fundraiser. And so I think even Ben Shapiro is being dragged to the right. And to your point, you think about the rhetoric when Donald Trump first came on stage and insulted John McCain, that prompted a fair amount of criticism on the right. Like, you don't insult someone's war record, right? He was in the military, he was captured. You do not insult that. Now, I think if Donald Trump made that remark, I doubt anyone on the right would criticize that. When Tucker Carlson first hosted Marjorie Taylor Greene on his show, that was touching the third rail, and there was some resistance to it. And over time, that just broke down. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene is a huge MAGA celebrity and can go on whatever podcast or right-wing show she wants. And so I think Tucker has always been at the forefront of touching that third rail, and there's always been some resistance, I guess, to it. And now you're seeing it with Dinesh D'Souza and others criticizing him for hosting Nick Fuentes. But ultimately, I think, 3 or 4 years down the line, I would bet that Nick Fuentes is pretty broadly accepted by a good chunk of the MAGA base. And we should also note, too, that he dined with Donald Trump, remember, a couple years ago. And so he is someone who is wielding, I think, significant power now inside MAGA world.
Right. I mean, Fuentes addressed that on the Tucker show, how he dined with Kanye West and Donald Trump and sort of painted it as this pretty serene scene. But Trump and Kanye, I mean, especially Trump, he took a lot of criticism for, embracing Nick Fuentes. But since that time, he's only grown even more powerful with an even larger audience. And I think that makes him a force to be reckoned with. And I think that if you are Tucker Carlson, who's one of the biggest figures in the right-wing media space, or if you're a lawmaker, politician who wants to make a mark for himself, you're looking at him and you're like, it'd be great to have his audience. It'd be great to have his, let's say, very engaged MAGA young guys on my side. And I suspect that is what's actually pulling them even farther to the right here, is like, that's where the energy of young people is. And it's not a great sign for where this is all maybe headed. I mean, these are people who are effectively openly embracing fascist concepts or Christian national, this infusement of an extreme religion and government tie-up, which of course is, completely antithetical to the whole reason the United States exists.
By the way, this also raises a question, I think, for like the mainstream outlets, like CNN or CBS News, that they want to host, people on the right. And like this week, for instance, Abby Phillip, who has a new book out, is doing a media tour, and she's been asked about why she brings on dishonest MAGA personalities, most notably Scott Jennings, on her show when she herself has called him a liar, recently actually, and knows likely that he is not, he's not someone who's a true teller, right? And she's been saying, well, it's important to hear the other side and engage with the other side and talk to those people and understand what they think. The problem, of course, becomes, well, if the other side is increasingly more and more radical and dishonest, how do you engage with that, right? And I think that's a challenge. If Nick Fuentes, and she said, she was asked by Tim Miller, would you bring on Nick Fuentes? And she said no. Would you bring on Candace Owens? And she said no. And I actually thought at that point, her argument of why you need to hear the other side started to fall apart, because it's like certain people right now, I guess, are considered too extreme to bring on. But, Jillian Michaels, who she had on, was saying some pretty extreme stuff that's been accepted by a large chunk of the conservative movement. And like, where do you draw that line? And how much, how do you treat these people as the Republican Party, becomes more and more radicalized? I think that's a really tough one for networks like CNN and CBS, and I think NBC and ABC would be fair to put in there, that want to, hear both sides, but one side is becoming pretty extreme. What do you do?
Yeah, this is why you just don't wade into that space at all. You just stick to the facts. We just do the news. We cover the news, and people who live in reality are the ones that you pay to come on and be your analysts. People who exist in the real world, rather than even both sizing an issue like what we're talking about. Like, sure, there are Americans, and a substantial chunk now, who believe this stuff. But what are we going to both sides, that we should be denying the Holocaust, or that, Jews are cookies? Like, what are we talking about? All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to discuss the traumatic day at Paramount, where they cut 1,000 jobs, including over at CBS News.
John, changing seasons means harsher air, drier skin, and the after effects of travel and summer sun damage catching up to you.
It's true. Your skin has different needs this time of year, and that's where OneSkin comes in.
If you haven't heard about OneSkin, they're the first skin longevity company founded by an all-woman team of PhDs in skin regeneration, tissue engineering, and stem cell biology. And their products are backed by 5 published clinical trials and over 10,000 5-star reviews.
Oliver, you've tried some of their products, right?
That's right, John. I'm an avid OneSkin user, which is why my face looks as it does right now, free of wrinkles, free of discoloration, and feeling silky smooth when I go to bed.
What's also great is that every formula is dermatologist tested. It's safe for sensitive skin and NEA approved. It delivers powerful results with skin health in mind.
This season, don't just moisturize, although that's important too, but support your skin at the cellular level with OneSkin. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin, just like us, with 15% off using code STATUS at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code STATUS. After you purchase, they're going to ask you, where did you hear about us? Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Try OneSkin today.
Welcome back. So Oliver, this week over at MSNBC and even inside NBC News, there's quite a bit of pushback to their parent company, Comcast, donating to Donald Trump's destruction of the White House East Wing to build his gigantic and what is now, I think, $300 million projected ballroom. This thing looks like it's gigantic. The models that they're showing off, it looks like it's as large as the White House. Is it bigger than the White House?
It's definitely bigger than the White House. Yes, it's like something from the Gilded Age.
And I get it. Like some of the rooms there were small, but like this is being done in what the Trump administration has really hoped away from the public eye, away from cameras. They've, I think that the public view of this destruction has really been visceral. People have really recoiled over this. These images of the White House, being ripped apart by excavators. So on the air on MSNBC, we've seen Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell make these pretty amazing comments talking directly about their parent company and how they're effectively trying to buy Donald Trump off with this donation. Here's a little bit of what they said.
For every corporation, like our parent company for another hot minute, Comcast, that wants to pay for Trump to take a literal wrecking ball, an excavator to the White House, those public-facing companies should know there's a cost in terms of their reputation with the American people. There may be a cost to their bottom line when they do things against American values, against the public interest, because they want to please Trump or buy him off or profit somehow from his authoritarian overthrow of our democracy.
And Comcast, the current but not for long owner of the company I now work for, doesn't think it's a big enough business. Comcast is committed to nothing but Comcast.
Pretty remarkable to see this on the air. Remember, Comcast literally still owns these airwaves, right? MSNBC, this is their boss that they're talking about. This is pretty brave. Like, let's be honest. We don't see this sort of thing very often. Their paychecks come from parent company Comcast, which owns a lot of things, including Xfinity internet at home. So it's pretty stunning to see this, and especially putting it in such stark views for the public, which is that this is a blatant attempt by corporations to buy favor, to curry favor with this president. What do you think about this, and what are you hearing from people inside the building over there?
I think anytime something like this becomes visible in public, John, you have to remind yourself that this is way worse beneath the surface. Like, there is a lot of anger, I think, churning beneath the sea here, and you're seeing flashes of it like pop up with MSNBC hosts going on air and chastising Comcast for this donation. But I've talked to quite a few people inside NBC News, MSNBC, and there's obviously anger. There's it's embarrassing that their parent company has made this donation as they are delivering hard-hitting reporting and analysis on the situation. And to know that your own parent company is basically trying to bribe the Trump administration, because that's effectively what this is, that really undermines, or at least cuts the reporters at their knees when they're asking tough questions to other corporations, or when they're just doing the reporting, right? It's very difficult. And it's also pretty transparent what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of crony capitalism that's coming right out of this. And I think the thing that makes it even more painful for Comcast in particular here, because look, we're talking about Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, T-Mobile. I mean, you go down the list, and then there's these random billionaires who are all buddies with Trump, and let's kick him a few $1 million, and he'll wink at us. Probably some crypto bros, of course. The thing that I think makes this really painful for Comcast is that they have a standards department within these news organizations, and they have clearly sent a message that every time you're going to do a segment on this, including on NBC, which has a much bigger audience than MSNBC, all the broadcast stations, which again, many of them NBC, therefore Comcast owns them, they say in front of every segment, including our parent company, Comcast. And then that's a setup for the piece, which does not paint this in the best light. And again, in the polling that we have seen, this has been catastrophic for the Trump administration. Like, clearly people did not think that this was going to be happening the way that it is. Trump and the White House themselves had portrayed it as, a much gentler, let's say, remaking of this. And this comes after they literally paved over the Rose Garden. They took a beautiful garden and put cement on the ground. It's like the Mar-a-Lagoization of the White House. And I think for most of America, especially right now, the government is shut down. We're talking about how people who rely on food assistance are not going to get it. And Donald Trump's number one priority is getting this big ballroom that's going to be filled with gold and all kinds of embarrassing shit that looks like the Kremlin. That's his priority. And people are watching this play out and they're going, how is this happening? Oh, I'm watching NBC News. And now I just learned that of all of them, it's Comcast, the NBC parent company, who's paying for this. I think that sends a signal to a lot of people about the relationship between some of these big established corporations and even media companies in this moment, that they often feel like they need to pay to play. And I think for a fair-minded viewer of this, that puts like an unsettling feeling in their stomach.
Well, it also makes clear too that these owners of media, they want to be tight with this White House. They want to be cozy with this White House. They do not want to be adversarial with this White House. And so if you are a news organization owned by a company or person who is behaving in such a way, it really, makes it clear that at the end of the day, your journalism, if it's too adversarial, if it's going to be too pointed and bother Donald Trump and the White House, it's very clear which side the ownership is going to fall on. And it's probably not going to be having your back. It's probably going to be, maybe you should tone down the coverage. Maybe it should be a little bit more fair, right?
Right. And the history here is honestly amazing. Have you ever heard of a guy named Brian Roberts? Most people have not, but Donald Trump sure has. And he has tweeted or whatever, truthed about him many times, calling him a lowlife, attacking him personally by name, right? And calling Comcast Concast, MSDNC, and you just go down the list. Like, Donald Trump either hates Brian Roberts or is playing a high-profile, very visible game. Imagine somebody is saying that about you. You're a lowlife, you're a disgusting person, just by name on the biggest possible platform. And what is Brian Roberts, who is, the chairman and head of Comcast, what does he do? He greenlights what apparently the New York Post reports is a multi-million-dollar donation to build Donald Trump's vanity project. It's hard to view a situation like that as anything other than what it is. If you were somebody who took it seriously that the president of the United States is going to attack you out by name and call you a lowlife just for running your media conglomerate, you might not say, you know what, here's a few $1 million, bud, have fun with it. You might push back on that, but in this age,
if
in
you
this
have a backbone, John,
if you
have a backbone, apparently Brian
Right.
Roberts, we learned this week, has no backbone whatsoever, and he just is willing to bow down before Donald Trump. I mean, that's how embarrassing. Like, someone has mocked you so publicly, someone has attacked your company so dishonestly, and the thing you do is you send them money. How absolutely humiliating for Brian Roberts.
Yeah, it really is. And many have pointed out that MSNBC, CNBC, they're being spun off from the NBC Universal Comcast mothership. This is true. And it's happening right before our eyes. They've already decamped from 30 Rock. But Versant, the new spin company that will control MSNBC, is still 1/3 voting controlled by Brian Roberts. So it's not like he's, completely separating from them. He is still very much a part of the future MSNBC where these hosts are talking. So it is remarkable. I am curious if anything is going to come of this. Maybe this is a moment where Comcast brass is sort of seeing more blowback than maybe they had expected. Yeah, we will see. Switching gears a little bit here in the media space, we had a pretty tough day over at Paramount. 1,000 staffers were laid off over there. David Ellison, as we've talked about many times, has just taken over Paramount. They plan to cut 10% of the staff across this giant studio. The first of which, the first 5%, 1,000 staffers, were cut this week. Many of whom were inside CBS News, which is now being led by Bari Weiss, the anti-woke free press founder. We hear, Oliver, that about 100 staffers were cut across several divisions inside CBS News. The CBS Saturday morning show is effectively being, let's say, killed in its current form, is going to be completely revamped. Their co-anchors, Michelle Miller and Dana Jacobson, they're out. And the race and equality team that covered diversity in the country is effectively more or less shuttered, if not a shell of its former self. What do you make of all these cuts over there?
Well, I think what's remarkable about this is that Tom Sobrowski, the president of CBS News, has had to be combing through the budget over the last several weeks and identifying cuts to make. While Bari Weiss, on the other hand, has been phoning up her friends and trying to lure them over to CBS News. It's almost like they're operating on two different budgets, right? Where like Tom Sobrowski has to cut the legacy, the CBS News that we all know and what has defined the company for so long. And Bari Weiss has this apparent war chest where she's trying to get high profile talent. People like, she's on her list are people like Brett Baer, right? Anderson Cooper, like very high profile talent that are very pricey. And so it's really interesting dynamic happening inside the network. Bari Weiss, the new editor-in-chief, gets to spend. Tom Sobrowski, the president, has to cut. And I think that's, if you're someone being cut from CBS News today and you're being told there's no money, you're like, wait a second. Wait, why is Bari Weiss, though, trying to hire all these like fancy people? Their salaries are way more money than what I'm getting paid. And also, David Ellison, if you don't have any money for CBS News, why did you just spend $150 million on Bari Weiss's The Free Press? I thought we have no money, right? It doesn't add up. And I think
it's such an incredible business, that Free Press. That's why, with such stellar journalism, they had to pay the top dollar for it. Look, I think I agree with you too. I mean, I think that either way, David Ellison, the new owner of Paramount, is going to come in and take a look at the whole company and make some changes to it. Change was sort of inevitable here, but I do agree. And his father, who's bankrolling all of this, David Ellison himself has like almost no money. It's all Larry Ellison's money. The Oracle co-founder who, makes billions of dollars in a single day, with all of the incredible investments into AI that Oracle is reaping. It's kind of challenging, I think, for people to believe and buy this idea that we have to make these cuts because we can't afford them anymore, when we have to spend $150 million to buy the Free Press. And the first month of Bari Weiss over there, she's trying to clearly put her stamp on the network, but these are things that are like really not moving the needle. And if anything, like have resulted in some sort of minor embarrassments for the network, where she, tried to get together these former Secretary of States that became public, and it didn't happen. Only, she got Hillary Clinton to come on a streaming show in the middle of the day that like no one is going to see. And it sort of strains understanding of what it is that they plan to do here and why they need to spend money in the ways that they are. Yeah.
Again, go back to what I was saying too, is like, there are a lot of cuts happening in media right now. That's not a surprise. And it's always painful. It always sucks when you have to cut people because the economics just don't justify the cost and you can't make it work. But I think what makes these cuts, if you're at CBS, especially painful, especially, aggravating, is it's clear the Ellisons have money and they're willing to spend it on things that they like. And it's, so it's not like they don't have money. And so they are basically saying, we don't value you, you're gone. And that's really what's happening here. They don't value the people that they're getting rid of. And so they're getting rid of them. If they valued them, they would keep them. They'd spend the money. And this goes back to, I think, what's happening at CBS News, which is Bari Weiss gets to spend money because the Ellisons want her to reshape CBS News to be much more in her image. And so if she wants to find a Fox News host that she can poach, I am sure that money is there. But do they care about the CBS Saturday, streaming show or the CB, do they care about John Dickerson hosting CBS Evening News Plus? No. And so when John Dickerson says he's going to leave, they let him leave. But they apparently want someone like Brett Baier. They apparently want someone like Scott Jennings. That's who they're interested in spending money on. And I think that's the big story. It's not that they're doing cuts. It's, that's part of it. It's that they are saying we're not going to invest in the journalists who have defined CBS News for the last several years or decades. We're going to actually cut them, and we're going to spend money in other ways.
Yeah. And as you point out with Dickerson, he was the co-anchor most recently of CBS Evening News. I think he's sort of the biggest, most visible change that people are going to notice if they're watching CBS. He decided to resign, as you reported this week, seeing the writing on the wall. He had just re-signed a multi-year deal with the network. He could have stayed and collected his millions of dollars and saw what was going on and was like, okay, I'm good. I'm out. And I think that, and he posted this message on Instagram to his readers, letting them know that, that his 16 years at the network were coming to an end. And I think that is very emblematic, like you say, about where this is all headed, with a clear political shift to the right. And I think much of this, it's easy to say that any new corporate owner of a news organization is want to make some shifts and some changes, put their own stamp on it. Totally cool. Makes a lot of sense. Of course, right? But in this case, what we're seeing here is a clear editorial and political shift that's taking place. And Donald Trump himself openly recognizing it, welcoming it, can't stop applauding the Ellisons in the process, which, as I understand, is a clear signal to everybody in this space that the Ellisons are effectively on his side, quote unquote, and are going to give him and his MAGA views in even fairer shake in his mind on the network. And it's hard to see how these kind of cuts that go right into the network are anything but they are. One source told Status this week that I think most people are resigned to the fact that this was inevitable at CBS News, but it is sad watching this place get gutted again. And I think that speaks really to what people are feeling over there now. All right, well, when we come back, we're going to be discussing CNN boss Mark Thompson, who's on a media tour this week, celebrating and even defending Bari Weiss over at CBS News.
Let me take a quick minute to tell you about the platform we use to run Status. It's called Beehive, and I've got a special offer for readers coming up. But first, here's a little background on why Beehive was right for Status. When I started this newsletter, I needed a platform that could grow with us. Something powerful enough for serious publishers, but simple enough to build without a large team of engineers or designers.
That's exactly what we found with Beehive. It was built by the same team behind Morning Brew, so they understand what it takes to grow an audience and build a real business around your work. Since launching, two things have made a huge difference. First, our newsletter actually reaches people because the deliverability is outstanding. We don't really have to worry about spam filters anymore. Second, the paid subscription setup is incredibly easy. This is where you can charge for access to your newsletter. Beehive handles payments, subscriber management, all of it. That lets us stay focused on the journalism while the platform turns our work into a sustainable business.
Whether you're an independent writer or running a larger publication, Beehive gives you everything in one place. A clean editor, a website for your publication, powerful growth tools like referrals and recommendations, and multiple ways to make money from day one. If you're thinking about starting a newsletter or switching platforms, Beehive is offering Status readers 30% off your first 3 months with code STATUS30.
Visit beehive.com/status. That's BEEHIIV.com/status and start building your newsletter today. All right, welcome back. So all over this week, CNN boss Mark Thompson, he's on a media tour. The network, as you may have heard, launched its new streaming service this week. This is the second attempt by CNN to get into the streaming business. They had their very short-lived, ill-fated CNN Plus that went away for several years, and now a new version of CNN streaming is back. The network, you're mostly going to get what you see on cable. Now you can stream it online for $7 a month, $6.99. So he's conducted a few interviews. I think most notably of which was with Peter Kafka over on his Channels podcast. In the interview, Kafka asked him some pretty great questions, including his thoughts on Bari Weiss, the new editor-in-chief over at CBS, which is, as we just talked about, is enduring a bunch of layoffs. He seemed pretty generous to her. Let's listen to a clip.
What do you make what's happening over at CBS News, where the new owner has said, we're fixing some bias that I want to come out and say, but there's a bias and I'm going to hire Bari Weiss to fix that bias? I can't work out from the coverage so far with any certainty at all about, in that debate or whatever, who's right or who's wrong. I would rather patiently wait to see how CBS News develops and then make an assessment of it.
Reasonable. Speaking of David Ellison,
I mean that sort of seriously. Yeah. In other words, I think it's incredibly easy to jump to.
Well, I guess the thing I would ask is yes, we should see what happens there.
Yeah.
But the point is, the owner has said, well, we have to reestablish trust. He has hired someone who's an active critic of mainstream media, saying, why aren't we trusted? They're diagnosing. They're saying we have a problem.
Also, they've talked about an agenda of fact-based journalism, yep. And I mean they've talked about some of the things I've talked about. I have to say, to be fair, they've talked about as well. So if I in terms of the statement and the journalistic principles and all the rest of it, much of that seems to me to be unobjectionable.
It's very funny. 5 years ago, we were talking about Bari Weiss too, and she had left the Times.
Yeah.
David Ellison.
I think Barry's, by the way, a really interesting figure. I mean, I'm not,
I agree.
And thoughtful and not to be stereotyped as in the way that she often is in the current discourse about CBS. I mean, I would say that she's an interesting kind of individual.
I agree that she's an interesting individual.
Well, there we are.
Pretty remarkable there, Oliver. Really giving her the benefit of the doubt. Really saying, look, I want to just listen and wait patiently and see what she does there.
Unobjectionable. Sounds like almost like he's a fan. Like she's saying the same stuff I'm saying. So, that's good. It sounded like he's almost a fan of what she's doing over there.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say is my take from this is actually like, oh, I would do some of the same things myself. It seems like we see eye to eye on this. What do you make of that? It's pretty surprising.
Well, I mean, it's also interesting given that there's all this talk about whether David Ellison's Paramount is going to purchase David Zaslav's Warner Brother Discovery, which obviously owns CNN. And so if that were to happen, it's very likely that Bari Weiss would likely oversee the entire news division, which would then include CBS News and CNN. And so he's possibly talking about a potential future colleague of his, maybe even a boss of his in the future. And so I think he's treading very carefully, but it's still, I'd say, a fairly disappointing answer from the head of CNN, who must know what is going on over there. He understands, obviously, the political implications here and like what's really happening. And so to say that he can't cast any judgment quite yet, even on her management style, which included sending that memo, to staffers demanding that they tell her what they do ahead of layoffs, which, no, I can't imagine Mark Thompson would do that. He won't discuss anything about her, really. He just kind of deflects. And I think that's fairly notable and I'd say disappointing.
I think it's pretty obvious what's going on here, right? The most likely scenario that's going to play out in the next few months is that CNN's parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, which is led by David Zaslav, that has put a for sale sign up on it. They're supposedly going to split into two, but David Ellison and Paramount are openly saying we want to buy it. And the only thing that's holding Ellison back from purchasing Warner Brothers Discovery is basically the price tag. And they're like this close to getting there. And in that scenario, which Ellison takes over, you now have him in control of CNN. And if CNN is under Ellison's control, then maybe Bari Weiss moves right in as editor-in-chief and they co-manage the CBS News division with their cable network, CNN. And maybe there's a scenario where she is editor-in-chief of a combined entity, and maybe you need a Mark Thompson, right? To be a sort of Tom Jabrowski who's like the president who understands how a television network operates, right? There's a lot of business, a lot of technical end of it that, she's probably doesn't have to deal with. It's really nice she could just be fully involved in the editorial. It feels obvious to me that Mark is going gentle here because of this real possibility that this is going to be his problem in like 10 minutes. And the sort of straining so hard to try to find the positive. Well, she says that she wants to make it fairer, and hey, that sounds good to me. It's like, okay. It's like, is that actually what's been happening?
It's actually
here?
Slightly embarrassing to pretend that that's actually what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the reporting doesn't suggest that. I mean, he's a journalist, right? The reporting does not suggest that that is what's happening. And that is not what the Free Press, which she founded and still operates, does. That's not what it is. It's an opinion site, an obvious right-wing, conservative, anti-woke opinion site. Remember that it is Mark Thompson's own CNN that actually has diversity values within them. The very thing that Bari Weiss, hates and has pushed back on having. It's hard to see this as anything other than a clear attempt to maybe start on a positive note with either his future colleague or his future boss. All right. Also this week, Oliver, we're getting really close to the most important election in America. You know what I'm talking about. It's the New York mayor's race, the one that will affect the whole country. We all need to be tuned in on this. Oh, I'm just kidding. Zohran Mamdani, the front runner for the Democratic Party here. He's been making the media rounds. He's been pretty much everywhere. A really, in my view, a very smart media strategy of going anywhere and everywhere that people will listen, even going on Fox, that sort of thing. This last week, he went on comedian, podcaster Andrew Schulz's show, Flagrant. Had a great time over there. Let's play a clip.
I also think this idea that like New Yorkers are going to flee because of a 2% increase, it's like, I've been everywhere else. You're not going anywhere. Bill Ackman's not going nowhere. He's going to be in the Hamptons all fucking
There's
summer.
only one place to write those tweets.
That's it.
New York City. Exactly. Every character you want.
AC goes out in July in Miami. You sweating writing tweets? There's no way.
He's spending more money against me than I would even tax him. Every day it's like $1 million. It's like $1 million. I'm like, Habibi, I don't even want that. You're going above and beyond.
Okay, but
pretty funny there. Bill Ackman, quite a guy. Is he really spending that much money to try to defeat Zohran?
Apparently, but it's so fascinating how Zohran is able to just turn that on its head, and how he's able to thrive, really, John, in any media environment. He does Fox News. He does really well there. He's able to do MSNBC. He does really well there. He's able to do the Andrew Schulz podcast, and he charms all of those hosts who, have been lumped into the, the manosphere that helped Donald Trump get elected. Well, Zohran is over there, and he's charming the pants off of them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because I think the thing that's sort of unique about Zohran in this race, in my view, has been that the attacks that have come against him always seem to sort of fall flat or just blow up in their face. The New York Post this week, did you see this story? They ran this front page piece that really made the rounds, going after him, saying that they had caught him in an obvious lie. Post 9/11, Zohran Mamdani had previously said that his aunt had hid the fact that she wears a hijab in public. But the Post nailed him. They found out that it wasn't his aunt. Couldn't have been. In fact, it was his father's cousin. Boom! We got him. And and this was everywhere. And look, if anybody knows anybody who is from any immigrant community, I have many aunts. I have many uncles, by the way, who are not like my pure aunt and uncle. Like all of my parents' friends were like my aunt and uncles as a kid.
That's how it is for me. All of my, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm an uncle to people that I'm technically not an uncle for, right? I'm an aunt.
Right.
I'm not aunt, but I have many aunts. I have many uncles. It's just sort of a shorthand for that person is,
Right. You're literally Uncle Ollie to my kids. Sorry, sadly you're not my brother by blood, but it is how it is. And they went after him with this story, and all that it did was really provide this like really embarrassing attempt to attack him. And this just gets to the heart of, I think these established places are very worried. These corporate owners like, Rupert Murdoch, who owns the New York Post, they're using this to go after him, to portray him as like this totally, crazy left. Fox is calling him a communist, which, come on. I guess he wants to have free buses. It's clearly communism has overtaken America's largest city. But we're right now at the finish line of this race, right? Tuesday is election day. What do you think is going to happen here? Do you think he's going to pull it off, or?
Yeah, he's going to win. I think he's going to win, and it's all due to his media strategy from the get-go, which was understanding how to do social media. Most people initially in the city saw him on TikTok or Reels or YouTube. He was very, very good at that. And he's been able to translate that media savviness on social media to also these big platforms. And anytime he goes on, even if it's in the lion's den with like Fox News, he does very, very well. And I think this is actually a lesson for the Democrats that they need to learn is throw out the scripted politicians, right? The people who just like collapse when they don't have a talking point in front of them, and start talking to the American people like actual people, right? Just have conversations. And that's what he's been doing this entire campaign. He's been having actual conversations. People view him as authentic. And it's, I think, all due to his media strategy that this 34-year-old assemblyman can take on someone like Andrew Cuomo, who is backed by all these billionaires, who has the name recognition from the get-go, who had the money behind him, and had a long career in government. And Andrew Cuomo is getting beat by a 34-year-old who's really good at social media, but also just engaging with the current media landscape as it is. And I think that's why he's going to become New York City's next mayor.
Yeah, reminds me a lot of Barack Obama's rise out of nowhere as a, quote, community organizer. And all that did was ignite the right with Fox News and others to just absolutely freak out over it. And I think that overreaction, all that actually ends up doing is giving him, even more runway and even more eyes to say, like, what is this? Why are these people freaking out?
Look at the biggest stars in the Democratic Party right now. They are all doing something on social, but also just engaging with the press in a different way. It's AOC, right? Definitely one of the top stars. Obviously, Zohran. Bernie Sanders, who is older, yes, but does these podcasts, engages in an authentic way, doesn't rely on talking points. And then I think you can throw in Gavin Newsom there too, who's doing a lot of interesting things, suffice to say, on social media. He's also engaging with the press. He goes on Fox News. These are the biggest stars in the Democratic Party because of the way they engage with the media. And the people like, Hakeem Jeffries, who go in the traditional areas and can't answer basic questions. I mean, it was like, I think, honestly, easier to pull teeth out of that man than to get a Zohran endorsement out of him. Like, those are the people that are actually flailing right now. The Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries who struggle in this new media environment and really don't come across as authentic.
So if you were a campaign manager, let's say, and you're looking at a media strategy in 2025, would you put your candidate on Fox News or on a right-wing podcast, or like legitimizing them in the process? I mean, they obviously have audiences, so in some ways that ship has sailed, but would you do it, or would you, take a different circuit?
I don't know if there's a good answer to that question. I do think, though, that Pete Buttigieg and Zohran have shown that if you come equipped and you just talk to them, like normal people, it really dismantles their arguments and it diffuses them in real time. And I think that to some extent is valuable. Now, he obviously, and they've gone on shows that are less in the propaganda side of things, right? They're not going on Sean Hannity's show, although I guess Gavin Newsom is. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's an open question. I think it was valuable for Zohran to go in there and show that he can take the heat, that he can go in the lion's den. I think that's what he gained from that. I'm not really sure he gained any voters, but I'm not really sure. I don't know if there's a good answer, John. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think you're gaining any voters on Fox. That's my view. I think you should do them. I don't think you gain any voters on there. But the social media clips, which is effectively what this is all about, where they go and live online, those moments I think can be either reinforcing or persuasive, right? That like you're not afraid of anybody. And like in many ways, this is the view that people have of Charlie Kirk in the wake of his death that they've really continued to praise, which is that like he wasn't afraid to talk to anybody. He would debate anyone. And that's what America needs, right? It's like we need more talking to both sides. And so I think that there's a lot of value in that like if you think you're an independent thinker, you're a moderate, you might be attracted to a candidate who's like not afraid to shy away from his biggest critics or those who might attack him. Take it head on. I think Donald Trump is actually shown as a good example of that in many ways, that like he'll talk to anybody. He may savage, credible journalists in the process, but he's willing to take them on at any time. And I think in 2025 now that this is so normal, that this is what we just expect, that it's going to be much more combative and less, I don't know, polished and gentle like in years past. Like this is the sport of our time in many ways. Quickly before we go, did you see this week that Elon Musk, after turning Twitter into the beautiful platform that it is now called X, has now launched his own, let's say, anti-woke version of Wikipedia? I don't even know what to call this thing. It's called Grokipedia. The whole thing is basically an encyclopedia of the internet, sort of a alternate reality version of Wikipedia, which is community, let's say reported and edited, right? People are all volunteers and do this. It's very transparent where their information comes from. Grokipedia, though, is Elon Musk's red-pilled, MAGA-friendly, very much far-right version of events. A number of articles that have surfaced on this it's published as like a 0.1 beta in its current version, but a number of articles that are on there show some immediate conspiracy theories injected right into these articles. I don't know if have you seen this stuff?
I have, yeah. It's all AI generated, I assume, right? Using Grok, yes, which is Elon's AI, red-pilled AI thing. And it's, I've been looking at different entries into this thing, and it's very clear that this is coming from a Elon Musk, MAGA perspective. All the news organizations, for instance, if you go on them, basically call them left-wing. If you go on Elon Musk's profile, though, he is not. There's no hint that he's a conspiracy theorist. Even if you go on Alex Jones's profile, it's a pretty sanitized version of who he is. But oh boy, if you're Jake Tapper, you are a left-wing man. And so this is clearly what it is. I think that the important thing is that the right is continuing to try to rewrite history in its own way, and that starts with the news. But it also, the encyclopedia is very important, and the history of events is very important. And so if you can rewrite the first draft of history, that's a very powerful thing. And so this sort of satisfies a little bit of that, right? Which is like Wikipedia has this huge stranglehold on our information environment and our understanding of events and people and history. And the right hasn't liked it because it will say that Elon Musk is a conspiracy theorist, or that Alex Jones is a conspiracy theorist or an extremist. And so what do? They create their own. And so,
they're creating their own version of history here. And The Verge has a great piece up this week, taking a look at different sections, different topics on Grokipedia. This is basically repeating the worst, sinister, conspiratorial junk that's on X back into people as if it's like a Bible of information. There's junk on there about IQ differences between different races, which many studies have shown is totally bogus and is used to go after people on for their race, to demean people of color. They include scrutiny and questions about vaccines pretty high up. questions about whether or not climate change is really happening, which I think is honestly amazing coming from Elon Musk, who said that the whole reason.
A lot of the citations are apparently not valid. It's like hallucinated things.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another issue with AI. Just, forget the Elon Musk of it all. But AI is not a reliable, truth teller at this point, and it hallucinates quite often. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the technology makes things up. And apparently that's happening in
whether or not
Grokipedia
this is here to stay or whether or not this is just the latest thing that he's interested. Remember just like a couple months ago when Elon Musk said he was starting the America Party and was going to defeat Republicans because he was so disillusioned with Trump? Like that has just vanished. That's basically dead and over with.
By the way, this would make me, because Grok is now infused into Tesla vehicles. And it's like, we think about it, I think, as like this online thing you can just ignore. But like if you drive a Tesla, like it's infused now with Grok. And I don't know. This is another reason I would probably not buy a Tesla or want to be driving a Tesla anymore. I don't want Grok anywhere near me.
You don't want your car telling you about eugenics while it drives you to the airport, Oliver? I don't know what's going on. Are you okay?
That's not for me.
The nice thing is by default, you just get into the car and it just plays Nick Fuentes on the stereo for you every time you get in. It's a
new feature for the Teslas.
It's a lot of fun. All right. Well, that's it for us this week. Oliver, happy Halloween. I hope you decide to actually dress up tonight. I'll catch you next week. Have a great one.
See you, John.
Thank you for listening to Powerlines, a presentation of Status, and a special thank you to Beehive for sponsoring this episode. The show is produced by Matt Havia and Antonio Enriquez in association with In the Arena Studios. Please like, share, and subscribe to Powerlines on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen, and watch full episodes and clips on our YouTube page at Status.